Welcome back to Overhead Athletics. I'm Max Wardell. Today we want to talk about something interesting that came up on social media. So I do a lot of posting on LinkedIn. I get a few followers on there, and we're talking about pitching, we're talking about mechanics, we're talking about kinematics, and a researcher, an individual who worked with a few MLB organizations, brought up the point of pitching in cleats versus pitching in shoes indoors. Fortunately, in the north, we're in the Midwest here, Michigan, we don't really have the option. We can't go outside, it's too cold, there's snow, 2 foot of snow on the ground. You got to be inside. You're going to be pitching on artificial mounds like this. This is what I use all year round indoors. Outdoors, we're pitching on clay, we're pitching on dirt, we're wearing spikes. And he brought up the point that, hey, it's not as specific if you're indoors pitching on a mound like this. And I have to agree, it's obviously more specific if you're pitching on the surface that you're going to pitch on in the game. But here's some interesting points. Let's think about the mechanics here in a second. Let's also consider that college baseball nowadays and a lot of high school teams, especially north, we're using mounds just like this in the game on turf fields. If I were to guess, when I played in college, I would guess that I played on as many turf mounds and turf baseball fields as I did on natural fields. So it's a good point, but it also, we have to consider that we're pitching on these in the games as well. A lot of high schools are starting to get them. The private schools are starting to get turf fields, turf mounds, because our weather's not great. But in college, especially in our conference in college, small schools, NAI, we had multiple, probably 5 or 6 of the, 12 or 13, however many schools were in our conference, probably half of them had artificial mounds and artificial turf. So it's an important distinction. But yeah, if you're going to be pitching on dirt all the time, these mounds aren't as specific, and you will have some changes on these mounds versus when you're playing on dirt and wearing spikes. One thing to consider is when you're on this mound, my foot can turn. So when I land, and I'm in a landed position, if I land with a foot that's closed off, pointed over here, maybe 45 degrees closed, that foot can spin open as I come through the end of my throw. But if I've got spikes, that foot's stuck right here. So we see a lot of athletes that land with their foot excessively closed, and they get away with it on cheap mounds outside where the dirt is loose. They get away with it on these indoor practice mounds. They won't get away with that on a nice clay mound that's got some stability, because what will happen is their foot will be jammed, closed, and they'll try to open, and they'll hit the end of their hip rotation. And then they're in more side bending away because they have to try to slow this momentum down, but their hip is at the end of its range. So then we see them more upright, leaning off to the side, and they end up in this follow-through position as opposed to this position because their pelvis can't rotate properly on their hip because their foot is too close from the target. So that's one important distinction. Another one is, hey, when you're pitching on these, we're pitching out of a flat surface. So when we're pitching in the game, we can use the toe of that cleat, dig it out a little bit, especially for somebody who doesn't have any ability to dorsiflex and get their knee forward. We're going to see that those individuals maybe benefit more from the natural mound, but also if you're pitching on a cruddy mound and your foot slips, hey, we may have a problem there too. So I think the two really important distinctions between turf or artificial mounds and our clay mounds that we use on the field is, number one, the position that I can put my drive leg foot in when I start, and then number two, especially important, is the position of the foot when we land. Additionally, when you land with good spikes on a good mound, that leg is going to be able to hit hard and allow me to get my chest forward and actually brace through this front leg properly. Whereas sometimes you don't get the same traction effect on a mound like this. And that's really the effect we're talking about. It's not so much friction, but more so traction, would be the technical term here. But really, what position is the foot starting in? Can we make that as specific as possible to what the athlete's going to do in the game? And then secondarily, what do we need to do to improve? If we see them, they might be getting away with that closed foot position here. because the foot spins, but they're not getting away with that on the mound. So how can we improve the positioning of the foot so that they can actually sequence their throw better when they get in the game on the mound with cleats that aren't going to allow them to compensate in that way? If you like this video, hit the thumbs up. We'll see you guys in the next one.